We worked the fire for 2 weeks, the maximum allowed. We dug fire breaks and cut tons of brush, and we held the line against the fire. I began to realize that my fears about the veterans were misguided. During training, they'd made every attempt to find out what made me tick. They really wanted to learn who I was. I'd worried they'd done that so they could break me when the moment was right, expose me, but I was wrong. That wasn't their intention at all. Guys covered for each other all the time. Travis Tuberville was one example. He was an ex-Marine who could do just about everything. If we needed to modify one of the buggies to carry a special piece of equipment, we went looking for him. He fixed and modified our tools, communications equipment too. Travis had hucked a radio all over for the Marines, so some days you'd come back from the fire line and find him with all the parts of our radio spread over a blanket as he patiently put it together. But while serving, Travis had suffered a serious head injury. A training exercise was what I heard. But I never talked to him about it. People's pasts were their own. If you wanted to talk about it, that was your call. If not, we respected that. That head injury had left Travis with a strange symptom, lack of balance. Maybe his inner ear thingy got knocked out of whack, but if you just looked at the man wrong, he'd fall over. If we were in camp and we heard a thump, we called out, "Travis, you all right, dude?" howling with laughter. But if we were on the trail, especially with a drop to one side, the guy behind Travis would keep close to him. Nobody had to say anything. It was just something we became aware of and all took it as part of our duty. I started to get to know the guys. I was still in awe of Eric. Was there anything the motherfucker couldn't do? Ice climber, surfer, mountain biker, and a college grad. Being so calm and so even-keeled, though he had a weakness for goofballs like me. I made it my mission to crack that man up every chance I got. I'd play some hardcore techno and start dancing like I was back at a rave. "Hey Eric, check this shit out." He'd look at me, take a sip of coffee out of his camp cup, and just shake his head. Jesse Steed was a full-on meathead. Ex-Marine, super into fitness, really got good with a chainsaw. If you got past his leather neck stuff, he was really a teddy bear. Robert Caldwell didn't look like a hotshot. He was a balding 21. It looked like he was going to ask you if he could do your taxes, but his famous quote was, "I'd rather die in my boots than live in a suit." He had a weird strength. We weighed the same, but he disappeared down the trail ahead of me quicker than a gazelle being chased. One day we were walking into a fire and Robert went past me with a chainsaw on his shoulder. I looked over and he had a cigarette in his mouth underneath his mustache. "Are you serious? You're going to kick my ass on the trail and smoke?" He grinned at me. If you look at Clayton Wooded, you'd think he was a truck driver or a former college tight end. Big dude, big smile, but Clayton was a man of God. He was the real deal, a Christian through and through. He always had his Bible with him, and back in Prescott he worked as a youth minister, led Bible classes. I wanted to be like that, but not yet. I was only 19. But if you had any spiritual questions, Clayton was the guy to see. He seemed to know what to do with his life, had that focus I was looking for. Sometimes it got him in trouble. There was a story I heard pretty quickly about Clayton and another hotshot working on cutting a big-ass tree out of a fire line. The roots went deep, and neither of them noticed how close the fire was until their backpacks started smoking and lighting up. Clayton calmly turned, grabbed the packs, threw them to safety, then turned back to see the tree falling right at him. He stepped out of the way, and the thing came down, whoomph, right where he'd been standing. Clayton carried on like nothing had happened. The fittest dude on the crew was Travis Carter. He'd grown up on a ranch outside of Yarnell, quiet as all get out, but the man was half cyborg. He'd get up in the morning, go to CrossFit, do their insane workout, show up, rip a saw all day, then hit CrossFit again on his way home to his wife and 2 young kids. He'd say 2 words the whole day, but he could serve up anyone on Granite Mountain. I'd spent most of my teenage years around guys whose main ambition was to score some primo weed and tasty nachos all in the same night. Just being around Granite Mountain expanded my horizons. I didn't like everyone at first. Later on in my career, Billy Warnick joined the crew, and he was one of the ones I really didn't get along with right away. He just rubbed me the wrong way somehow. It was almost a chemical response. During PT, he'd be trailing me during our hikes mile after mile with this blank expression on his face, and I'd be like, "Go ahead and pass my struggling ass, damn it." But he never would. Then one day we were out on a fire and he was carrying someone's pack who was feeling sick that day. Did it without being asked. On top of that, he was a badass ex-Marine, and I respected that. I went over and started talking to him that day and learned he was expecting his first child, a girl. We had a resident thug life career. Annie Anthony Rose, who joined up in 2012. Originally from Chicago, he tried to play it like he was a gangster. Then his girlfriend would call and he'd turn into a proper gentleman on the phone while we wilded out in the background. A hard worker, smart as hell, baby on the way too. What did we have in common? We'd all been down different roads searching for a decent life. Some had become drug fiends for a while, some had tried the military and seen things they couldn't unsee, but most of us had found that what we wanted in Granite Mountain, a steady job, service, adventure. I was learning the job. A few days into the Chickamauga fire, the boys let me do the weather. Out in the wilderness, weather and fuel are what drives a fire. To know how a fire might act in the next 10 minutes, you need to get extremely localized conditions. So a few of us carried a belt weather kit in a little pouch. In each kit are a sling psychrometer for measuring humidity and anemometer for measuring wind speed, a small bottle of distilled water, and a compass. The psychrometer is the most important tool. It has two parts, a wet bulb thermometer and a dry bulb. You find a spot typical to the terrain and the fuels that are burning nearby. You stand in a shady spot or block the sun with your body if there's no shade so that the radiant heat doesn't affect the reading. Then you dab some of the distilled water on a wick attached to the wet bulb, let the bulb down on the metal chain it's attached to, and start swinging in a tight circle. You face into the wind so your body temperature isn't throwing off the reading, and you swing for a full minute. Check the temperature, taking care not to put your finger on the glass. Swing again. After a minute, check. If the temperature hasn't changed, you have your wet bulb reading. Then you look at the dry bulb to get a number. With those two readings and the humidity chart you carry on a piece of laminated paper, the psychrometer will tell you what the humidity in the air is. Then you check the wind speed and direction. You check the weather every hour. If conditions are changing fast, you reduce that to every 30 minutes. Then you get on the radio frequency the crew is using and say, "Granite Mountain, stand by for weather." You pause a minute and to give anyone who wants to write down stats a minute to whip out their pens and paper. Back on the radio at 100. Temp is 96 degrees, up 2 degrees over the last hour. Humidity is 14%, down 3. Wind is 12 miles per hour from the southwest. Anyone need a repeat? The man doing weather is on the lookout for invisible things. He is watching his brother's back for the storm winds that can drive a fire at 50 miles an hour and engulf them in a wall of flame. He's key to keeping everyone alive. The fact that Eric let me do it meant a lot to me. Toward the end of the roll at Chickamauga, we were being routed back to them and down the mountain for some sleep and a shower. We just finished a 32-hour shift, and I was clean wore out. As we were getting ready for the chopper, I felt relief flow through me. I saw Chris looking at me strangely. Chris, my old tormentor, my number one nemesis. He hadn't said much to me on the trip. "Where's your chin strap, Rook?" he yelled. I felt under my hard hat. Damn it, the plastic chin strap. I could have sworn it had been on there this morning. Now it's gone. Fuck, I said. "Can't get on the trapper without a strap," Chris said. I saw a gleam in his eyes. Was he happy I'd fucked up at last? Are you fucking kidding me? The guys around me shook their heads. We heard the chopper in the distance making that womp, 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 womp noise. "What should I do?" I yelled. Chris frowned. "I'll tell you what. I'll fix you up. Shut your eyes." I closed them and heard a tearing sound. Something pressed against my helmet, and I felt some sticky hit my chin, then wrapped around. More tearing sounds. I felt grateful. Chris was looking out for me, showing me some respect. Finally, the tearing sound stopped. I opened my eyes, and Chris was backing away for a smile on his face. "Thanks, man," I called out. "Oh, you're welcome, dude." Chris started laughing hysterically. The other guys were hacking up along as well, even Eric. Someone took a picture with his cell phone and handed it to me. Chris had used about half a roll of fiber tape to attach the helmet. I looked like a total dork with a hard hat taped to his head. I found out later that Chris had stolen the strap so he could fuck with me. Didn't matter. I was smiling ear to ear. In hotshot crews, you only torture the ones you love. Leaning back against the vibrating seat in the chopper, I felt I'd achieved something. I'd helped save thousands of acres of God's green earth for bears, mountain lions, rabbits, and red-winged blackbirds. I'd withstood the last traces of drugs in my body, and I'd proven to the 19 men around me that I wouldn't give up on them, no matter what. I was part of the Brotherhood. If we weren't called to a wildfire, my normal day went like this. Show up at the station about 7:40 a.m., dressed in my green fire pants, a t-shirt, boots, and a hat, grab a water, everyone else drank coffee, get my lunch together, sit on the front porch, put a chew in, and shoot the shit with the other guys. At 8 a.m., we'd have a morning briefing on fire conditions, weather, and JAH, or job analysis hazards, meaning what might kill us out there, falling trees, lightning storms, and a bunch of other dangerous shit. We'd load up and do PT. I'd be nervous as hell because whether I could make it to the end of a hike was always an open question. Come back, do solid core body work, a pyramid of pull-ups, which means you do 1, come all the way down, then you do 2, come all the way down until you do 10, then you count all the way back all the way down to 1. By the end, you'd do 100 pull-ups or planks or push-ups, break for lunch, then go out and do fuels around Prescott, drive to different locations in town and cut brush, make the houses defensible, 3 or 4 hours of that, then head back to the station, clean the saws, wash out the trucks, final meeting with Eric where he reviewed our performance. It was grueling. We'd be out on the trail and someone would look up at the sky and say, "For God's sake, someone start a fire." Or another guy would call out, "Where's the lightning when you need it?" We wanted to fight fires, not only because that's what we'd been trained to a fine edge to do, but because Eric's training was such a killer. Fires also meant overtime. There were part-time guys on the crew making $12 or $14 an hour. They really loved the job, but the money was hard to justify with 2 or 3 kids at home. Fires were the only way they could make a decent living, so in a way, you prayed for the thing you feared. We didn't turn down fires. You want us in Oregon, Florida, Hawaii? We're there. In the beginning of the season, we'd do an overnighter, head out to a mountain that had been flagged and fight an imaginary fire to keep sharp, spend the night out there and tell some stories and laugh some. But if there was a fire, we'd be out in the bush. Sometimes we were even sent to New Mexico or other hot spots and pre-positioned staged into an area where there was a high likelihood of flames touching off or lightning strikes. And that summer, the fires were unrelenting. One after another, Yuma, Chickarauga, southern Arizona. End up putting in 1,100 hours of overtime that season. I loved what I was doing. Every fire, I learned something different. I learned how to read the terrain and how to use a compass to navigate trackless forests. I got better at predicting the weather. I learned basic medical techniques because if you get hurt on the fire line in the wild, you're likely to die. The work sites can be so remote, a chopper could take hours to get you to the hospital. I started to learn about the different kinds of wildfires. Grass fires, for example, are fast and dangerous. A tall grass fire is a killer. It moves quicker than any other type. If a good wind gets behind you, you better pray the wind doesn't shift, because if it does and you're caught in the green, unburned terrain, that fire is going to run you down. The only good thing about grass blazes is they tend to die down at night, so you can sneak around them and cut them off before they get going again in the morning. Big timber is another big thing altogether. A fire going through a wilderness with tall pines and sycamore will crown. It'll fly across treetops, moving so fast it doesn't even touch the timber, just burning up the needles and leaves as it speeds 100 feet above your head. In a crowning fire, the flames are almost your second most dangerous adversary. It's the trees themselves that'll kill you. You're working ahead of the fire, cutting through pines that are 2 and 3 times as thick as your own torso. Mistakes are easy to make. Guys have lost their legs or had their heads caved in. I started looking at different types of vegetation as fuel and learning their characteristics. Juniper is spread across the southwest, and we often find ourselves fighting blazes where it was the majority of the fuel. It's dry and dusty and especially dangerous because it tends to throw spot fires. Scrub oak will spot less, but it burns super hot. And when you get out into the forest to fight a fire, you have to be aware of what animals like to hide in scrub oak. Not only wild turkey and mule deer, but black bear. Manzita, little apple in Spanish, is an evergreen hardwood that seems to burn forever. The oil is stored deep within the plants, sustain blazes long after you think they're dead. Trees that carry a lot of oil or resin, pine is one example, will burn faster than hardwoods like maple or cherry. That's why the fat wood you may use to light your fire comes from the heart of a pine. It's packed with resin. The only good thing about Manzita is that if you get poison ivy out in the field, you can use the tree's berries to treat it. Scrub, brush, and trees react to radiant heat of the sun. A shrub or a tree can hold 3 times its weight in moisture. When a fire hits a plant like that, it barely burns. Think of green wood smoking and not catching in your fireplace. When temperatures increase, plants release moisture. A piece of timber or brush that experiences a high dry heat will go from having 300% moisture to 30% fairly quickly. That number fluctuates more than you would think. A hot sun with low relative humidity can dry a shrub quick. That's why hotshots take weather measurements each hour. You're measuring how dry the fuel is around you, and that can fluctuate significantly over the course of 60 minutes. When the plant gets hotter, the fuel becomes easier to ignite. That's why the afternoon hours, when temperatures peak, are the most dangerous ones for wildland firefighters. At night, fires often go to sleep, but between noon and 5 p.m. is when you really earn your money. You would think that the high desert would have little to burn, but in fact, everything in it is flammable. Even cactus catches fire. I never knew that until I became a hotshot. Those things will light up like a green cigar. Guys told me stories of what to watch out for in the field. The season before, another crew Chris had been working with was doing fuels work in California in winter when the temps are cooler and the wind isn't as strong. It's supposed to be easy, a way to rest up and get some hours in before the summer kicks off. But that winter was different. The temperatures were so high that helicopters were flying ice just to cool the guys down. They were ferrying heat stroke victims out. Tits up is a technical term we use to describe heat stroke. You're dehydrated, you're exhausted, your muscles are cramping. I thought I'd die of dehydration, Chris told me about that trip. I thought he was joking, but it's true. Hotshots have actually died from lack of water out in the field. If you're working a blaze and you get so into it that you forget to hydrate, you can do yourself in. To guard against it, I ended up getting a Camelback, which is a hydration pack filled with water that you wear like a backpack. That thing saved my ass multiple times. There are lots of weird ways to die on the job. When you're working big timber, you have to watch out for widowmakers. Those are the things up in the canopy that can come down and kill you. Dead branches, trees, even pine cones. I learned that there are pine cones in California forests that are big enough to split your skull open. One time after we'd work a 32-hour shift and had gotten flown off a mountain, Eric was leading us toward our camp so we could get some sleep. We were marching along the trail and Eric told us to watch for widowmakers. I was half delirious by that time and completely misheard him. I thought he said a spider widow webs. Don't ask me how. That's just what I heard. Eric, I called back. Yeah, just take a rake and rake that shit up. I was talking about getting the spider webs out of the branches so the black widow didn't drop down my neck and bite me. Eric was confused. What did you say, Donut? Get a rake and rake 'em up. What are you talking about, son? Eric said in his drawl. Widowmakers, Donut. The stuff in the trees. That's what I'm talking about. I got shit for that a year later. Jesse and Eric would be finishing up safety briefing and ask for questions, and someone would raise his hand and says, "Sound good, but when do we get the rakes to rake that shit up?" Goof-offs. There are other things out in the wild to be scared of. Lightning storms were terrifying. We'd be on the slope mountain ranges, and a storm cell would come over and start shooting high electricity down into the pines. The tallest trees act like magnets for lightning. Then the chaotic winds of the thunderstorm that followed played havoc with the fire itself, driving it one way or another like a dog gone crazy with rabies. Totally unpredictable. A lot of times, if a storm moved in, we pulled back from the fire line because the chance of getting caught in a shifting blaze was much higher. During those times, you'd run out of the tree cover and, crouching in a clearing, praying for the lightning strikes to stay away. The rain and hail would be pelting you and freezing you to the marrow. Freezing rain, cold rain running down your back into your underwear. Boy, that was an experience I could have happily missed. Snakes were another job hazard. A lot of the terrain we were working in was a natural habitat for speckled rattlers, western diamondbacks, sidewinders, copperheads, and a bunch of other nasty critters. The main reason we wear high leather boots is the smoking debris we walk through, but another good one is to avoid snake bites. I killed my share. We even had rock parties. When we spotted a poisonous critter in the area we were working, we'd all grab a rock and have at it. One time we were hiking through a salt-sweeter swamp. I was trailing behind, and all of a sudden I heard someone screaming, "Snake! Snake! What the hell?" I said to myself. The hotshot doing the screaming was Mondo, who was famous for his glossy black mustache. As he walked through the salt cedar, a baby rattler had dropped from the tree branches onto him. It was now wriggling on his chest strap. The baby rattler can't control its venom like an adult snake can. It can give you 10 times a fatal dose if one of the bites, making it far more dangerous than a grown-up rattler. We circled around Mondo, wondering what to do. We couldn't smash the damn thing or try to slap it off for fear it might strike and kill this guy with one bite into the chest. So we tried to calm him down as the thing wriggled on his shirt. His face was pale as a sheet of paper. Finally, it dropped off. Mondo sat down, his chest heaving. It took him 10 minutes to get calm enough to recover and get back on the trail. Lizards were a different story. I love the things. I'd find one on the first day or two of a fire and keep him as a pet, giving him little pieces of my rations to eat. I'd put one in my pocket and he'd just chill there as long as I dug line. Let him out back in camp and let him crawl over me as I started to fall asleep. I even talked to little guys. Why not? It's just you and 19 of your best friends. No one out here would to judge you. A bunch of the guys adopted little friends for excursions. Crawdads, which are little crustaceans that look like mini lobsters, were our favorite. Guys would carry them around in little jars of water, attach their belt loops, and then set them free when we left. Out on the fire line, you could get to feel like a machine working in a smoky, noisy, dangerous factory. Why not have a little buddy to call your own? Don't knock it if you haven't tried it. I'd expect dangerous animals as part of the job. If your workplace is the wild, you have to accept that. But what I didn't foresee was the cartels. Some of the fires we fought were in forests or mountain ranges that extended all the way down into Mexico. We were cutting brush and digging fire lines along well-known drug routes, and you had to be on your toes or you could find yourself with a nice neat hole in your head. The cartels ran drugs and illegal immigrants up and down the same trails we were using to reach the fire line, and often they didn't know we were coming. Sometimes they even started fires to cover up their activities, whether it was smuggling desperate people across the border or moving black bales of marijuana along the trails. The La Brea fire in 2009 near Santa Barbara was caused by drug traffickers who were using some kind of cooking device. 137 square miles of prime ranch land turned into cinders. After hotshots went in and knocked the fire down at the risk of their own lives, investigators traced the blaze to a remote little canyon in Los Padres National Forest. Near the origin spot, they found an AK-47 charged as shit and about 30,000 marijuana plants. Maybe the traffickers were cooking up their dinner as they watched over the plants when the fire started. Maybe they were getting some shut-eye and a spark from their campfire touched a propane tank. Or maybe they were camped on a rival's territory and ignored orders to leave, so someone got to them and burned their crop. In 2011, the year I joined up, the Monument Fire erupted in eastern Arizona. It burned about 30,000 acres. Investigators traced the origin to the Coronado National Forest, which was closed to visitors and vehicles. The only people operating in Coronado were the cartels and drug traffickers. The cartels employ scouts to watch the trails for border patrol and rival gangs. Sometimes they light signal fires to let people know their sector is too dangerous for cartel soldiers, or at night they get cold and they start a campfire to keep warm. 2 other fires burning at the same time, including one that burned over 800 square miles, were also started by humans. They were most likely not innocent by mistakes. Cartels use fire as a weapon. If the authorities are busy fighting a raging wildfire, they have no resource to catch bandits or snakeheads, the guides who brought illegal immigrants across the border. A lot of the pot farms have armed guards. Other times, the cartels leave the farms unguarded but will set traps, wires strung up across the road that can decapitate you if you're driving an UTV, or tripwires laid on the trails and attached to loaded shotguns or IEDs. We had to watch out for all of that shit. One time we went to the Arizona-Mexico border to fight a wildfire, and at the briefing, Eric paused and then said something I'd never heard before. I want you guys to wear your yellows at all times. We have information that there are 2 cartels battling it on the terrain we'll be going into. There are reports they have high-powered rifles, and I've also been told that they know we're coming in, and so long as we identify ourselves in our yellows, we'll be left alone to fight the fire. What? That was some cloak and dagger stuff. We went out into the brush line and started cutting. There was extra tension in the crew, just wondering if we were being watched. It's a spooky feeling, gives you an icy patch at the base of your spine. We didn't get shot at on that job, but we did find a Mexican dude nearly dead of thirst on one side of the road. At first we thought he was a corpse. He was just lying there in the morning light, unable to move. We were on our way off the fire line and we said to each other, what do we do? Mondo gave him some Gatorade, but he was so messed up he couldn't keep anything down, and so dehydrated that an EMT we called to the scene could barely find a vein for an IV. The Border Patrol finally came and took him away. I'm not sure if he was a cartel soldier or an illegal immigrant who got left behind, but a couple more hours out there alone and he would have been a goner. Hotshots are at the mercy of weather and of history. When 9/11 happened and the planes went into the Twin Towers, the FAA shut down all air traffic in the United States. You couldn't even fly a helicopter. A crew of hotshots was working high up in California and they were stranded. They had to hike out some hellacious number of miles. When you're a hotshot, you're an afterthought, invisible to everyone except your family and your brothers. If you're due to rotate off the mountain top and the fog settles in, or high wind grounds the chopper, you forget it. You walk. We flew into Montana that summer and fought a big timber blaze. The choppers couldn't come to us. The winds were too extreme. We were worn out after a week of swamping and cutting, cold food and little sleep. We were black-faced zombies. So what do? I asked Eric. We hike out. Shoot me now, I thought. There were no roads where we were. It was trackless wilderness, and it was wet. It had been raining off and on for 4 days. The worst part was our boots. When water gets into them, your feet rub against the leather and they turn to sushi, just raw, pulverized flesh. I didn't say a word. This was the job. We hiked out.